This moment may actually signal that Homelander is already starting to lose. At first glance, that sounds strange. Homelander kills one of the original members of the Seven. He removes a character who's been around since the very beginning. That sounds like dominance, that sounds like power. But when you really look at what this moment represents, it tells a very different story. Because Homelander didn't just kill A-Train, he exposed his greatest weakness. And that weakness has been building for seasons. Since the beginning of The Boys, Homelander has always relied on fear and control. He doesn't just want power, he wants loyalty. He wants admiration. He wants everyone around him to believe he's untouchable. But as the series progressed, that illusion slowly began to crumble. Characters started questioning him. His instability became more obvious, and his need for validation grew more desperate. By the time Season 5 begins, Homelander is no longer the calm and calculated villain he once appeared to be. Instead, he's more unpredictable, more emotional, and more dangerous than ever before. And that's exactly why A-Train's death becomes so important. Because killing A-Train doesn't strengthen Homelander's position, it weakens it. A-Train wasn't just another member of the Seven, he was one of the originals. Alongside Black Noir, Queen Maeve, the Deep, and Translucent, A-Train represented the foundation of Vought's superhero empire. These were the characters that helped shape the public image of heroism in this universe, and now, one by one, they're disappearing. That's not a sign of strength. That's a sign of collapse. Because every time Homelander eliminates someone close to him, he isolates himself further. He removes the few remaining people who understand him. And more importantly, he creates fear among those still standing beside him. Loyalty begins to disappear. Trust fades. And eventually, Homelander is left ruling through fear alone. But fear doesn't create stability. It creates rebellion. And that's exactly what this moment sets up. There's also a deeper layer to A-Train's death that makes this even more significant. A-Train's story began with tragedy. In the very first episode, his reckless speed killed Robin Ward, setting off the entire chain of events that launched the series. That moment defined him as selfish and careless. But over time, A-Train began to change. His guilt grew, his perspective shifted. And by the time Season 5 arrives, he finally reaches a point where he's willing to sacrifice himself for something bigger. That's why his death matters. Because A-Train dies making the right choice. And that creates something Homelander can never understand: redemption. While A-Train grows and evolves, Homelander moves in the opposite direction. He becomes more unstable, more paranoid, and more disconnected from humanity. So even though Homelander wins physically in this moment, he loses emotionally and symbolically. And that's where the real defeat begins. In interviews, Anthony Starr has spoken about Homelander's mindset, describing him as insecure, childlike, and desperate for validation. This is what makes Homelander such a fascinating villain. He's incredibly powerful, yet emotionally fragile. He wants love, but he uses fear. He wants admiration, but he destroys those closest to him. That contradiction is what ultimately leads to his downfall. Because power without loyalty doesn't last. And every time Homelander eliminates someone, he pushes himself closer to isolation. Meanwhile, the world around him is changing. The resistance is growing. Characters are forming alliances, and Homelander's control over the narrative is slipping away. This is why A-Train's death feels like the beginning of the end. Not because Homelander loses physically, but because he loses control. There's also an important symbolic detail hidden in A-Train's final act. When he chooses to save someone, instead of repeating his past mistakes, he completes his character arc. He breaks the cycle that defined his journey, and in doing so, he becomes something Homelander never can: human. That's the real contrast between these two characters. A-Train becomes more human. Homelander becomes less. And that difference is what ultimately determines the outcome of the final season. Because The Boys has never just been about superpowers. It's always been about humanity, morality, and consequences. Characters who grow and evolve tend to survive. Characters who refuse to change tend to fall. And Homelander has refused to change. That's why, despite killing A-Train, he may have already lost. Meanwhile, the final season is building towards something massive. With new alliances forming and tensions rising, every decision carries more weight than ever before. The show is clearly moving toward a final confrontation, one that will determine the fate of everyone involved. And A-Train's death is the spark that sets everything in motion. Because it sends a message. No one is safe. Not even the originals. As the final season continues, one thing becomes clear. Homelander may still be the most powerful character physically, but emotionally and strategically, he's losing ground. His allies are disappearing, his enemies are growing stronger, and his instability is becoming harder to ignore. So while Homelander may believe he's winning, the truth is far more complicated. Because sometimes, the biggest losses don't happen in battle. They happen in the choices you make along the way. And with A-Train gone, Homelander may have just taken one step closer to his inevitable downfall. The final season has only just begun. But if this premiere is any indication, Homelander's defeat might already be inevitable.